Hello everyone, I hope you are well. My name is Romani Reid and I'll be hosting this webinar on the behalf of the Significant New Mental Health Charity. So this webinar we're going to talk about the phenomenon of magical thinking and whether it has a place in wellbeing. So this webinar is going to be slightly a debate or having a side for magical thinking and a side that maybe questions magical thinking in the context of well-being. So it'll be a lot of thinking, being receptive to new ideas, and I hope you enjoy it and expand your mind to look at another aspect of our thinking or behavior that may be beneficial or you may not agree with, but just a little twist on the topic. So as you can see on the right, we have the charity logo. I hope you've had a chance to check out the charity. We have some resource pages that are very beneficial and informative. We also have some news blog articles as well, talking about various topics in relation to mental health and well-being that may interest you. And we have some engagement on the social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram with our charity as well. So there'll be a link at the end of this webinar to check out the Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channel as well, where the previous webinar was, and a video by one of our trustees. So in this webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about stress and the prevalence of stress and its, connection, or should we say, how we feel with COVID-19 and how stress has really upped its ante on our lives and everything really, and magical thinking and its definitions as well, and how it relates to coping strategies and well-being, as well as questioning its implications for mental health and well-being as well, and how we can possibly be careful around magical thinking and get the best out of it, or the best positive outcomes from something such as magical thinking. So as you can see, stress is very prevalent in our society. I believe it's an inescapable phenomenon that we are expected to endure and tackle with practical solutions, and sometimes these solutions are not there. They're not accessible to all of us because we don't know where to look, or depending on our background or where we live, and we need to find ways to cope with it or process things that are stressing us out or creating adversity for us. And as you can see, in 2018, the Mental Health Foundation, they conducted a poll and they found that a majority of their participants in their poll felt stressed and overwhelmed and unable to cope, and 29% of them used alcohol to really feel better or to alleviate the feelings of stress, as well as 32% of them feeling suicidal due to their stress. And you can imagine these numbers or these statistics were generated about 2-3 years ago, and how much these numbers must have changed with the pandemic that we find ourselves in at this time, and the several lockdowns and loss and grief that most of us have experienced due to being in this horrible predicament and this virus. And it poses the question of, we need to either tap into undervalued coping strategies or implement the ones that we maybe don't notice that we're doing, and harness it and create something more innovative with something that we already do or know. And this brings me on to magical thinking. So magical thinking has a plethora of definitions, but for this webinar I'm going to focus on only two. So the first definition comes from Rosen and Nemiroff. So they believe that magical thinking comprises of two laws. So the law of contagion and the law of similarity. So the law of contagion, that states that objects that have once been in contact with each other may change or influence one another, or change for a period extending well past the end of contact. So what that means is, we have a picture on the right of someone that's dropped their food on the floor. So I know from personal experience, if I've dropped food on the floor, regardless if it's been on the floor for 1 second, 2 seconds, beyond 5 seconds, I believe that it's contaminated and I don't want to eat it. Many studies have come forward to say that food doesn't just automatically get contaminated straight away when food is dropped on the floor, but it is just a preference or an innate response to basically be put off and turned off that. And that is an example of magical thinking happen and the law of contagion. And as we'll see throughout the webinar, there are so many behaviors or so many examples of when we personally do it or with things that we see or engage in, and how that relates to magical thinking and how it's beneficial for us or has produced positive outcomes that stem from this law. And this brings me on to the law of similarity. So law of similarity is that objects that resemble one another or share integral properties share the same reality. So what we mean by that is something that may look the same, we view it as the same as the previous thing that we have seen before. So for example, if we have chocolates or sweets, lovely chocolates and sweets are nice, and they are shaped in the way of like bugs. So it could be a chocolate that's shaped as a beetle, or a jelly baby that's shaped is the shape of a spider, and that also may make us reluctant, or I'd say, reluctant, apprehensive of ingesting that and eating that. And that is due to the law of similarity, because they share the same image or they share the same similar properties and the same shape. And once again, as you will see, that this law as well is very prevalent in our waking life, and we do demonstrate these behaviors without us really knowing, or we do have things out there that share these properties and that follow these laws that, and that is consistent with magical thinking and what it's about. So for our second definition, we have Ogden. So Ogden, he explained magical thinking as unintended thinking that constructs a psychic reality that is much more pleasant than the reality individuals find themselves in. So Ogden reiterates that as individuals, when we are stressed and when we are finding ways to cope, we create a safe space mentally inside ourselves, inside our psyche, to protect ourselves from adversity, or at least process it and enhance our well-being, or protect our well-being, should I say. And this ties in closely with coping strategies and how we find ways to cope within ourselves, then have those practical solutions out there for us. So magical thinking does have a positive role in our evolutionary past. Research suggests that, or loads of scholars, they believe that magical thinking is an A-leaf. So an A-leaf is a behavior or thought process that is primitive in nature and is subconscious and automatic. It just happens just straight away. It's hardwired into our psyche. The researchers Homans, Malinsky and Saboksky, they supported magical thinking in our evolutionary history, and they believe that it helped us in appropriate circumstances to protect ourselves from danger in the early stages of life and in our prehistoric history. And this can support the notion of magical thinking helping us and helping maintain a positive outlook to things and maintain our well-being in a certain sense. And this can closely tie into the system 1, system 2 analogy, with system 1 literally detecting straight away, being hardwired, detecting dangers around us, and maybe it might not be a danger, but thinking it's that to protect ourselves, instead of the slow system 2 thinking that is taking time to process the adversity or the possible dangers that we're going through and react, and maybe it being too late or the damage has been done on our mental well-being or well-being in general. So that can once again support magical thinking's positive role, positive history in the history of evolution, really. So once again, with magical thinking as a coping strategy. So to Wilt and Schultz von Raff, they believe that magical thinking is an early defense mechanism that individuals use when they perceive a loss of control. So they believe it's something that helps us have autonomy over a situation that we may feel helpless in, and brings meaning to those situations that are quite ambiguous and out of our control. And this, in a sense, helps us cope with the situation at hand and helps us, still maintain that well-being despite everything going on around us. And magical thinking has been used to cope with adversity in contemporary instances of history, or very infamous or famous historical events as well. So as you can see, the Gulf War, if you don't know, I'll remind you. So the Gulf War happened in 1991 and occurred when the United States declared war against Iraq due to Saddam Hussein, the dictator, invading Kuwait and claiming that area as the 19th province. So that caused a lot of war and turmoil for the people in Iraq, constant bombing and just constant unrest. And Keenan found, when he was looking back retrospectively on the war and the circumstances around the war, he found that individuals who are in high levels of destruction or high stress conditions displayed a higher levels of magical thinking. And that was done to cope and to process all the turmoil and all the turbulence around them. So once again, magical thinking was used to process these horrible circumstances and these horrible feelings that these individuals endured due to war. And this is quite similar to the Weimar Republic as well. So with the Weimar Republic, the time period after World War One has caused a lot of financial complications for the people and resulted in hyperinflation. So money at times didn't mean anything. It was worthless. It was hard for people to live, really. And retrospectively again, Paget and Georgeson, they found that magical thinking and superstitious beliefs and behaviors were used, or there were high levels being demonstrated of magical thinking and superstitious beliefs to cope with hyperinflation and to cope with the hopelessness and the anxiety of these financial implications for the people. And this is synonymous to the Gulf War, where magical thinking was used to process feelings and to process situations which were out of individuals' control to help them stay level and calm. And because of studies such as these and magical thinking's positive role as an alias in our evolutionary history, this can, make us pose the question, can magical thinking actually enhance our well-being in contemporary instances of how we are now and what we find ourselves in now, especially if it's hardwired in our psyche to occur when we do feel control, and whether we can harness this to improve people's lives and not just for coping. And some scholars and researchers have found a positive connection with magical thinking and well-being. So Solander in 2000, he studied a patient that was suffering from cancer, and he found that the patient, on purpose really, created a skewed perspective or reality to cope with their diagnosis, their cancer diagnosis, and this made them feel less vulnerable. And this can tie back to Ogden's definition of magical thinking and creating that psychic reality to make that individual have more autonomy over a situation or feel better about what they are going through, and could support and endorse the notion of magical thinking being a positive ally to mental well-being and to well-being in general, physical well-being in this study as well, in this research. And Niemska in 2015, so more contemporary to where we are now, found that the law of contagion helped individuals who missed their loved ones, that left home and went away. She found that the contagion helped them keep the feelings of pleasure and those memories that they had with those loved ones, and avoid the feelings of loneliness with those loved ones not being in their lives anymore, these participants or individuals' lives. And this can also tie into the law of similarity as well, keeping things that resemble or have similar properties or similar feelings to individuals or to other objects, to keep those feelings and to literally the closeness as well, and how something such as this that we may have done can be harnessed in a more active way to help individuals process feelings that they don't really want to confront. And it's just a testament to magical thinking being more, or it can be a positive, can produce positive outcomes for individuals if we harness it and we use it in a particular way. And Hudson also endorses magical thinking due to metaphor therapy using or tying closely to magical thinking and its element of symbolism as well. And Hudson found that metaphor therapy, which has magical thinking sprinkled all throughout it, helped individuals process a romantic breakup. So what he found was when individuals were told to take an object from their ex-romantic partner who they were romantically linked with in the past and to go and bury it somewhere far away from themselves, it enabled them to detach from those feelings that they felt of hurt and those painful memories of not being with that person, and basically the opposite of Niemczy's study. And he found that that helped them move on and helped them feel much more better and to enhance their mental well-being and to keep that mental well-being at a stable and steady place. So, siding with all the rest of the studies that we've mentioned and magical thinking's history, that it can produce positive outcomes and is very understated and in behaviors that we may not think about, and maybe if we paid attention to it or made more of an effort to incorporate some of those laws or some of those elements of the explanation of magical thinking, such as the psychic reality, to a certain extent, we may be able to have better coping or to enhance how we feel in our waking life. But with that being said, with magical thinking, there are instances where it can be negative and there can be dangerous and harmful to our psyche and to our well-being. And McCaffrey, for instance, actually went he rebutted what Hudson felt about metaphor therapy and his endorsement, and he argued that Hudson didn't mention the long-term consequences of believing false totalities about reality and how dangerous it could be if magical thinking is engaged in for a long time, and how it's not the best thing for our mental well-being if that it can cause possible harm in the long term. And we have a plethora of researchers who support this thinking or support this view of magical thinking and have found that it can be indicative of psychological vulnerability and disorders such as OCD. So what we mean by psychological vulnerability is us being susceptible to developing disorders or mental illness as well, and that it can be accompany a certain mental disorder but also be a prerequisite to having something, us developing a mental health issue, unfortunately, as Kumbera and Horadihidi found in 2016. So this obviously makes us think that there is a positive side to magical thinking and has been linked to positive outcomes, but there is also the bad as well. And with the good and the bad, what we must think about is balance and how we can attain that balance and how we can reap the benefits of magical thinking's positive outcomes for individuals, but avoid the harm that can occur in the long run or help make individuals develop a mental health issue. And I personally believe that for this to happen, we need to implement magical thinking into interventions or into mental health professionals' conduct, but either do it only when it's you think that it is relevant, and to do it in crucial times and sparingly to maintain those positive outcomes for mental well-being, and to find that balance. And I believe more studies and more research will find that balance of how to use something such as magical thinking to get something positive for individuals. So with magical thinking, Some people are on the fence about it, some people totally don't agree that it has a place in wellbeing. And after this webinar, after you do your own research with the links that I will put below, maybe you'll be able to make up your mind, and you might not be able to side with it, but it's something that I believe and other researchers believe that we should be more receptive to, and that good can come from magical thinking if we are careful and if we are receptive to its positive outcomes. So here you have some of the research and the links that I've gathered for this webinar for you to go and see what you think and where you side on the debate as well. So here's the next one. It's quite a bit of research to kind of get out there, to formulate some ideas. But I just want to say thank you for listening to this webinar and opening your mind and being receptive to something such as magical thinking, and possibly seeing a different side to a certain extent. So here we have the Significant You charity link. If you haven't managed to check the Significant You, you have it at the top there, and these are the links to our Instagram and Facebook page and YouTube channel as well. So I hope once you do check it out, you'll be able to get something positive from it, or engage in our social media platforms as well, or ask a question. But thank you for listening to me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and yes, enjoy your day or your weekend.